Namo tassa bhagavata arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Saṅghāṃ namasami. So this is session number 5 of Beyond Eye Making. And last time I introduced the 4 stages of eye making. The first stage, the underlying disposition to conceit, our inherent tendency to self-reference everything. Underlying disposition, it's there all the time. Second one is then the arising of I am, the conceit I am. I mean, how we, break this down is pretty relative. It just happened to come to my mind that way. 4 is a nice round number too, so it's important to have an even number. But the next stage is identification. Because once I am is set up, this thought I am, and then it looks around for something to give itself some stability, some reference, some authenticity. And this is really the stage where most of us are actually working with identification. This is much more relevant. I mean, where self begins is sort of a bit arbitrary, but I guess in the Buddha's time it seemed to be reasonable that when the thought I am was there, at least you can be able to notice it, be aware of it. Although most people aren't. It's so automatic, they don't even know that it's just a thought in their mind. Automatically, I am. I see, I think, I feel. Well, the Buddha points it out, so at least it's for most people it's observable if you pay attention to it. Maybe at a more subtle level, it's too hard to see. There's some psychologists say that already the primary patterning of a personality begins at the moment of conception. And then the Buddha did make reference to previous existences. Anybody remember? It does take a bit of the psychic powers to know them, but so it's not the average person's experience. Even though people say they do, they keep talking about their past lives. Some people, Buddhists anyway. But who knows? How can you prove it? Whereas you can observe, I am arises. And then I am seeks for some object to grasp onto, to give it some solidity or substantiality or some existence. And the Buddha pointed out 2 things. Well, there's 3 actually, but for all intents and purposes, it's better just to say 2, keep it simple. 2 things that the I am grasps. I mentioned briefly the 6 senses last time, and the other one is called the 5 groups of grasping, which is, I'm sure you heard about it if you read Buddhist teachings, but what is it? It's a little bit problematic because it's not so commonly referred to, and even when it is written in the scriptures, it's pretty, I don't know, at least for me anyway, it's a bit obscure. Not now, because I studied it, but previously it was pretty obscure, partly because some of these terms are almost defy translation. They're referred in terms of at the time of the Buddha. People had a different frame of reference. So nowadays we maybe have different ideas of what are the primary sources of grasping. Our iPhone. That defines me. or our job or something or other. But anyway, these 5 groups of grasping are mentioned very often in the Buddhist scriptures, and the Buddha gives many meditations on them, so it's helpful to understand what they are. And to really understand them, it's helpful to go back to what I mentioned about the Buddha's original awakening experience. Remember that? I think it was session 2 or something. But you may recall that I pointed out that he had this awakening to the causality, conditional causality, sometimes referred to as dependent origination, but in its formal sense. But he recognized the causal sequences. What is the cause of suffering? Birth. What's the cause of birth? Existence. What's the cause of existence? Grasping. Remember that? Well, the gist of it, to keep it simple, was that in his awakening experience, what was really crucial in it was he had a whole different shift in his way of seeing the world. I define it as his whole way of seeing the world shifted from object-orientated to process-orientated. You get that? Most people still are object-oriented. We see objects. We see people. We don't see living processes, do we? Maybe some doctors do or something. Maybe a nurse does. Seeing, organic processes there, walking around, talking, getting sick, getting old, whatever. No? Okay. Keep meditating. But changing to processes was the Buddha's breakthrough to awakening. Rather than look for something, the ultimate essence of a being, he just saw empty processes. There was no essence, no self, as it were, ultimate self, essence. They were just processes, selfless processes going on, which have an appearance of a self, of course. Like these 5 groups of grasping, these are 5 of the fundamental functions of life. They're just as soon as you're born, these begin to function in your life. Then grasping hold of them gives them some solidity, or appearance of solidity anyway. When you try and hold something, then give it some substance, right? But actually, in essence, there are processes. Unfortunately, the English language is not designed to explain processes. It's hard to explain anyway. It takes an enlightened Buddha to know it. But for example, the English language, lots of nouns in it, right, rather than verbs. So we say the wind. Can you show me the wind? Can you show it to me? The wind is a noun, but where's that thing called the wind? All you see is movement of air, right? Well, you see the effect of movement of air. It's a process of air moving, but we say the wind. So it seems like it's something solid. Maybe if somebody came from another planet and you said, "Oh, there's the wind," they say, "Well, show me the wind. Yeah. What color is it? How much does it weigh?" You say, "Well, it doesn't weigh anything, and it's colorless." And thank you, very clear. But look at that tree moving. Oh, I see. That's the effect of the wind, you see. So these 5 groups of grasping are not things. They are ways we function in the world. And the first one is body. Well, it's called rupa. Rupa. And for all intents and purposes, it is basically body. I mean, it's explained as the 4 great elements: earth, fire, water, air, and what is made out of that. So it can be, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as form, because it is some kind of substantiality, materiality, you can say. And the 4 great elements, you know what the 4 great elements are? I mean, we say earth, fire, water, and air, but it doesn't mean we're made of dirt or candle flames or something. Those are symbolic of certain processes. Earth signifies solidity, stability, solidity, something solid. Fire is temperature, heat and cold, and water is liquidity. Something that it binds things together. And then there's air, which is movement and space and kind of distension, fills things out, you see. Those are the four kind of physical processes that everything we call material is made out of. You say, well, where's the water in this floor here? It's the water that binds it together. The floor is, predominantly earth or solid element, but there's air in there too. Yeah. Okay, a little bit, air is a little bit minor point. There's temperature there, hot or cold, Water in it, yeah. Especially today, it's very damp. But you got to look in terms of these principles of, solidity or fluidity or space, distension, spaciousness, rather than actually the physical things of water and earth, you see. But it's mentioned as far as the 5 groups of grasping goes. There is one scripture which gives kind of a poetic description of rupa, and there's a little pun on the word rupa, and the Buddha says, this. Why is it called rupa? Because it's rupati, which means it's sort of broken up. But the words are not related at all. Just as a nice little poetic pun, you see, rupa and rupati, you see. And then it mentions what's it broken up with? Broken up with flies, mosquitoes, hot and cold. So obviously he's referring to the physical body, not the floor. The flies are not going to bother the floor, but they bother you, mosquitoes. So we'll just say it's the body, But like I said, they're not things. So I have translated it as embodying. We don't have a body. These 4 elements are embodying in this particular place right here, this particular form here. Those 4 elements are embodying here, and they're always changing. Like today, I felt a little bit heavy, even with all the rain, but. Maybe it was all that too much cake today. But your body has, you can recognize that there's various aspects to the body. Parts of the body are more solid. If you look at the teeth of the bones, a bit more solid than the flesh, a bit more earth element in them. Anyway, we just say it's the body. It's embodying. There is this, rupa is embodying. Because they're processes, I define these terms in the verbal form, in the verb form, rather than noun form. They usually are translated, because they're in English, proper English, rather than my English. They're translated basically as nouns. But it keeps confusing people, and they think it's something. So I'm trying to point out that these are just processes. They're always dynamic processes, changing all the time. So embodying rather than body. The second one is feeling. We heard that before, right? I think I mentioned a little bit about it when I mentioned about the sense, the perceptual process last time. Feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feeling. And then the third one is Sanya. Mentioned a little bit about it too. Sanya it comes from sa-jnana. So it is a knowledge, jnana, that puts together, puts things together. Associated knowledge. Usually it's translated as perception, but when you get down to the details, perception is so vague. Yeah. What is perception really? It includes a lot of different aspects to it. but it's so vague that, actually, in fact, the proper English word would be apperception, which is technically applying a name to what you know, what you're aware of. But since that word is hardly ever used these days, anybody heard apperception? Yeah. So I translate it as recognizing. Because basically it's just giving it's giving an association to what you know. When there's a sense perception, when there's a sense contact, there's just vijnana, is just knowing, bare knowing that, sense contact. And then, if there's enough energy to it, enough momentum to it, it becomes sanya, which is then, what is that? That is a wall. Right? Then the only problem is that, while vijnana can be quite precise, it's just whatever is that sense contact, sanya is distorted because it's based upon your memory. So, if you haven't seen walls before, or you live in a cave, you can't recognize that nice smooth wall. Unless your cave has nice smooth walls to it. But not only is it distorted by, our limitations of the senses and what your memory, what you're familiar with, it's also distorted because it has a lot of self-interest in it. If you remember from the sense, the perceptual process I mentioned, that the movement goes from vijnana, feeling, sanya. Vijnana and feeling are automatic. Just you can say pure functions. But sanya has already got some self-interest in it. It's based upon, so-called your memories. And your memories are based upon what I have interest in. Like we all sit in this room together, but probably everybody sees something different here. Everybody has a different memory of this. Huh? Some will say, that was a very intelligent talk you gave. Others will say, I didn't get anything. So I can hear who it is already. Some will say it's too hot. Some will say it's too cold. It's it's very, very personal what your memory is of it, of this event. And you ask different people what you experience. What? My memory was this. How can you remember that? Were we at the same place? The fourth one is sankhara. This is one that almost defies translation because it has two meanings to it, basically. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi mentions 5 different translations of it. But in terms of the 5 groups of grasping, there are 2 aspects to it. Again, it's sankhara. You heard kara already, ahankara, I-making. So sankhara means making together again. Sankhara, whatever makes together. And the primary element in this making together is intention. It's will, intention, volition. But sankhara means 2 things. It is what makes things and what is made already. 2 aspects to it. So again, how do you... I think Bhikkhu Bodhi says volitional, that's the intention part, the making, formations. The formations is what's being made, or what's already been made by the intention. So if you look at will, for example, when you do things, what's the result of your actions? Habits. Yeah? You do something one way, and then it's easier to do it again. Because you got a pattern already. They even find that it's physiological. When your brain thinks of a thought, certain neural pathways, it's getting really intellectual, but interesting, certain neural pathways line up, see, to make that thought appear, and then those synapses stay there. So next time you begin to think, That pathway is already set. So it's much easier to think that way again. So you get in these mental habit patterns. Keep thinking, and then it also is somatic, physically too. You do something one way, and then you go try and clean the floor out there. And then it's just for some reason you start in one corner. The next week you're going to clean the floor again. Automatically you start in the same corner again, even though there's absolutely no reason for it. Somebody might even come along and say, "Hey, that's the wrong corner." That's the corner by the door. So if you do it there first, you can't get in the kitchen. Oh, but then it's harder to change unless you're really alert. Next time you go to clean the floor, you go to the same corner again because it's already got the same habit, you see. So anyway, for purposes of my book, I define sankhara as willing, that's the intention part, and habiting. Okay, those who don't speak English, you just learned a new word. Okay, well, willing, will is chaitana in Thai, isn't it? Chaitana, will, yeah. Pali, but they use it in Thai too. I don't even know what it is in proper Thai, but chaitana, yeah. So it's will or volition, it's intention, which is kama, right? Also. And what it makes is this habit tendencies. If you keep using that will again and again and again. See? But again, people think, they usually, if you define it as a noun, habit, you think, well, habits are hard to break. But it's habiting. You only keep it going because you keep reinforcing it. So it is a process. It is changeable. You can break out of habits. Of course, it is a bit harder once a habit is formed, and the deeper the habit, the harder it is. But it's possible. It is changeable. They even find, they used to believe that, I think it was when you're 25 years old, your brain is kind of atrophied. Not atrophied, but is fixed in your views, you see. Your whole personality is already fixed at 25 years of age. But now they find neural plasticity. Is that right? Neural plasticity. So your brain is actually more plastic. Not made of plastic, if only. but it's changeable or flexible, more flexible than they first thought. So even old people like you and me can learn. The only thing is it takes a bit more effort because of those old habits. You see, they are formed, but they can change. It just takes a lot more effort, that's all. So there's still hope for us. This isn't a religion only for young people. In fact, the young people, many of them have a habit of restlessness, which also is difficult to deal with, sometimes even more difficult than lethargy. Lethargy could be translated into tranquility and equanimity. Sometimes sleep, but so now we come to the fifth one, vijnana again. Yeah. This is probably the most important one of all, and it's also a jnana, a knowledge, vijnana, but it's more a distinguishing or separating knowledge. You see, so it recognizes, like for example, if you didn't have this vijnana didn't function in your brain, you wouldn't know anything. It separates nothingness from something, like sense contact. There's actually lots of sense impressions here. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought going on at the same time. But your vijnana focuses on one or two and picks them out, distinguishes them from this background of kind of, you can say, sensory chaos. Vijnana comes along and says, oh, there's a wall. There is this sensation in the body or something or other. But the translation is difficult. There's probably no really good word in English. I kicked this around for 5 years, how to find a translation for vijnana. The usual translation is consciousness, but it's problematic. The Oxford English Dictionary, I've been to Oxford, but I need somebody more intelligent than me, defines consciousness as a person's awareness or perception of something. Isn't that very clear? Huh? we already use perception with Sanya, so I mean, so we got awareness and perception. Now it's called consciousness, huh? So very confusing. And most people, I think, from what I read about consciousness, they assume that consciousness is not just as the Buddha defined it as bare knowing, but it's also some kind of understanding of it. And you're conscious, so you know what it is and where it comes from and how to use it. That's kind of much more like consciousness. But then you're mixing up now Vijnana, Sanya, and Sankhara. They I think one image was used in the I think it's the commentaries, is something like, Vijnana is the perception of something round on the floor. The Sanya recognizes, oh, it's a coin. You see, Sankhara says, what can I buy with that? Sankhara is already, it's more correct to say something like it's a whole collection of mental processes, not just intention, but habits of all kinds of attention, decision. Thrown into Sankhara in the Abhidhamma anyway is also, greed, aversion, delusion, the hindrances. The root cause of unskillful kamma is greed, aversion, delusion. And since kamma is intention, which is sankhara, it's logical that sankhara should be greed, aversion, delusion, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, and it's also non-greed, non-aversion, non-delusion. There's positive aspects of sankhara too. You take away the recognizing, the memory, take away the bare knowing, and sankhara is all the rest of the mental activity going on. It's the hindrances, the confusion, the doubt, the worry. It's the positive ones, mindfulness, sati, samadhi, or sankhara also, aspects of sankhara. If you put energy intention into developing samadhi, for example, concentration, collectedness, it becomes a habit, skillful habit. So you have the intention to develop it, then you develop it, and it becomes then a skillful habiting of your mind. So it's a skillful sankhara now, as your background in your mind. Yeah. So sankhara, vijnana, I define it as bare knowing. Again, I tried to find, for years, first of all, I was using for many years distinguishing knowing, distinguishing things, but it's a bit too complicated. It's a real mouthful, distinguishing. Bare knowing catches people's attention anyway. Bare. but it's a bit more clear what it is. Just the bare knowing, this is it. That's it, finish. Nothing else. Don't add anything else to it. Don't put any clothes on it. Just the bare knowing. Don't embellish it with anything like Sanya and Sankhara. They don't embellish it. Just the knowing. But it's it also, because it is just the bare knowing, it is also defined as the primary element of life. Life begins when consciousness, vijnana, bare knowing, they say descends into the womb. That's the beginning of life. It's like this, there can be a living cell, if you like, but no knowing in it. It doesn't exist, really. It doesn't know it exists. So it's not really a life, is it? There's no self-awareness there. That's where life begins, with that element of knowing there. Very, very rudimentary at first. But this vijnana can be developed then. Yes, it becomes other kinds. It's a trigger for other kinds of knowledge, like sanya. And panya is also jnana. See, it is a knowledge to a very developed degree, panya. But they all begin with vijnana, primary knowledge of life. So if you keep that in mind, see, that's why that's why it is, say, one of the primary functions of life. It's like recognizing sankhara. It's some kind of mental activity, primarily driven by intention, will. Will is a very primary aspect of self too. Usually we don't even notice it. We're so caught up with our self-will. We don't even notice when we will something. But every action you do has will in it. Whether it's, it's actually making effort to go out for a walk somewhere, or it's just lifting your hand to scratch your ear or something. But we're so much part of it, wrapped up with it, we don't even notice it. But there is my aspect of myself working. And we just assume that it's ourself. So then we come to identification, the next one. So this is where the I am from the last stage begins to try and find some object to identify itself with. And there's two parts to it. There is the objects of identification and the activities of identification. See, it's defined in the scriptures. Let's see. 3 different ways identification is defined. One is to regarding, just thinking about or understanding the five groups of grasping as a self, but it mentions 4 different modes. A bit refined, I won't go into it in too much detail. You can read the book. So the 4 modes are, you see the 5 groups of grasping as a self, as yourself. It's probably the most common one, right? I am this body. I am my memories. As the self is possessing the 5 khandhas, as the 5 khandhas in the self, and self in the 5 khandhas. Probably it's the last one, a self or soul, if you like. In these 5 khandhas are only, kind of the worldly expression of yourself. There's really a soul, an essence of a soul inside them all. That when these 5 khandhas break up at death of the body, when the body breaks up, no more source for, they would say sanya and vijnana and feeling. A dead body doesn't feel anymore. Yeah. But the eternal soul goes on anyway. But anyway, just, those are a little refinement. The second way it's regarded is that these 6 senses are, and the external objects, vijnana, contact, feeling, and craving, are understood to be, this is me, this is mine, this is myself. And the third one is craving. That the identification takes place because of craving. Very, 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 very powerful emotion of craving. You can just imagine that, this I am looks around and says, who am I? I got to be somebody. Give me some life. Give me a personality. Craves for recognition. So anyway, to summarize those 3, basically it comes down to ignorance and craving. And there's a very common phrase mentioned quite often in the scriptures that says that we are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. That's why we continually have renewed existences. So, hindered by ignorance, fettered by craving. That's kind of the short explanation of identification. So we've got the objects, 5 groups of grasping, and the senses of identification, and the activities of identification are ignorance and craving now. Okay? So what is ignorance? Anybody know? I don't know. I'm sure you do, but you just don't want to admit it, that's all. Well, formally it's mentioned ignorance is not knowing the Four Noble Truths. Dukkha, cause, cessation, path. That's kind of the basic lesson of life. When you know the Four Noble Truths, you can find your way out of dukkha then. It's also not understanding as it really is, the five groups of grasping. Not really understanding them. I mean, the reason that there is suffering is because of grasping the five groups. So it's almost the same as understanding the Four Noble Truths. Understand dukkha, you understand the Four Noble Truths, understand the five groups of grasping. Or there's another way of approaching it. It's not understanding the gratification, disadvantage, or escape from the five groups of grasping. I'll come to this later when I get to the cessation of ignorance. But the Buddha has basically three different approaches to look at identification. There is the Four Noble Truths, there is this gratification, disadvantage, escape approach, and then there is the three characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, no personal self. So it depends, I would say it depends a little bit on the personality. It's my speculations again, but for those who maybe are a little bit more greed temperament, better maybe look at the Four Noble Truths. That'll bring you down. If you greed and then you have to contemplate dukkha, I'm not quite so cheerful. If you have a lot of, maybe some aversion, perhaps contemplating the gratification, how also life can be pleasing. But then there's a fly in the ointment, a disadvantage too. Even though that life can have gratification, it comes to an end. Oh, it's tough luck. And then if you're a bit more delusion temperament, or they also say intellectual temperament, contemplating the three characteristics is very helpful. Impermanence, unsatisfactory, it gives you a little bit more, more, you can say, more themes to contemplate. Impermanence. And it requires a little bit of sharpness to observe impermanence in things that appear to be solid, you see. So anyway, ignorance, don't take it personally. Ignorance is one of the underlying dispositions, folks. We got it as soon as we're born. That's why you have to go to school, you see, and learn things. Or you have to come to a monastery and study religion, study Buddhism, because we don't know it. And there is two main causes mentioned in the scriptures. The first one is what it was called the outflows, the asavas. But again, it doesn't really say too much, because one of the asavas is ignorance. So ignorance is causing ignorance. Okay? So you're in there deep, man. Once you got ignorance, you get into the ignorance loop, you see. Ignorant about ignorance, about ignorance, about ignorance. So that's why fortunately we have the Buddha to help us, throw us a lifeline, you see. And another cause, a practical cause of ignorance, is what the Buddha defines as inappropriate attention. And ayoniso. If you attend to the wrong things, for example, this is part of how how Sanya gets corrupted. You look at the beautiful side of life. You give attention to the beautiful side of life, and then you don't realize that, there is another side to it too. only looking at one side of the picture. You don't see the other side. So your perception's always you're recognizing, always looking for the beautiful side of things. The glass is half full, and then when it's half empty, you don't get it. So the other side, the other activity of identification is craving. Here is a very deep topic. Craving is also very, very deeply ingrained. You can say it's probably the primal, emotional activity we have, craving. It's the Pali word is tanha, literally means thirst. So you can maybe I was going to use thirst before, because sometimes just changing the definition of some of these words breaks us out of our kind of a complacency. Sometimes you hear these words thrown around, craving, and okay, right, I heard that before, but what is it? But when you hear thirst, this is like a primal instinct, isn't it? You get thirsty, you get hungry. Yeah, that's craving. It's very, very basic, very fundamental to our being. We thirst for life. We thirst for sense, not necessarily sense pleasure, but sense stimulation. As soon as you have the six senses, they want to be active. They start to be activated. I don't know, this is speculation again, but the young baby in the womb, even they have eyes, they don't see very much. What's there to see? Darkness. But as soon as they come out of the womb, they're born, then their eyes open and blinding light, funny looking faces of the doctors. Which one's my mother or father? Not even that defined yet, anyway. But there's craving is very, very, very fundamental to our living, a way of life. So then don't take it too personal. If you didn't have craving, you wouldn't be here probably. But it gets us into trouble too, because we don't recognize what it is, and so we overreact to it. Yeah. So there's three kinds of craving: kama tanha, sensuality, bhava tanha, craving for existence, craving for life, craving to be alive, and craving for non-existence. It's like trying to get rid of something, craving for a pleasant experience, and craving for the non-existence of an unpleasant experience. That's a craving for non-existence. And when it's defined in the Pali Canon, it says it gives rise, this craving gives rise to future existence. You can just imagine, I don't know if you can imagine or not, but, I don't know, probably not many of us know about our, so-called past lives, But if you recognize this power of craving, I don't have any ability to know the past lives or the future lives either, but if you're aware of craving, you can just see how powerful that is to drive life. So even when I can imagine when this body breaks up, there still is craving there. It's looking for some way out, some new way to reaffirm its existence. Yeah? I'm looking for into outer space, and I'm looking for anything to keep me going. And that it's also connected with delight and passion. So if craving is a little bit of a hard to get around, a difficult concept to get around, there's also other aspects of it: delight and passion. Passion is raga, very, very strong desire. So the craving for kama, sensuality, also works at a very, very fundamental level. Okay, I think at a very, very fundamental level, that the sense of a self just needs something to give it some affirmation. Like I say, the subject needs an object. So this I am is looking for some kind of something outside object. So it needs some sense stimulation. It needs some kind of sensory stimulation, even if it isn't pleasant. I mean, some people, who have some, emotional disturbances, they even crave pain to give them some sense of being alive. They're so emotionally numbed out, but they look for something to, even if it's painful, to give them some kind of recognition they're alive. Not just sensual pleasure, but even sensory pain. So at a very fundamental level, it's just craving for some kind of sense stimulation. And then it gets a bit more developed as you get older, when you can pick and choose. You start choosing the pleasing ones, the sensory pleasures through the six senses. And this becomes a habit, so you just keep feeding it, if you can. And it's a little bit tricky because, sense pleasure does have its attraction. The Buddha said it is the well-being and ease, sukha somanasa, the sukha. When there is satisfying a pleasure, there is sukha, well-being. So everybody appreciates well-being. Every sentient being appreciates well-being. So it's attractive. Where we recoil from dukkha, from pain, or just any kind of displeasure. And there are, this craving is included in a whole list of things which are called the net of existence. This is their desire, passion, delight, craving, taking up and grasping, resolution, adherence, and the underlying dispositions. It's mentioned a few times, this phrase mentioned a few times in the scriptures. You may come across it again. But it's like there's a whole range of different things get constellated together. Like there's emotional ones, desire, passion, delight, craving. Then there's some kind of intellectual ones, the resolution, adherence. Resolution is like determination. You get your mind fixed on things. And then there's underlying dispositions, very kind of instincts. So it's working all different levels, instinctual, emotional, intellectual levels, craving. Even if it's a bit hard to notice the craving intellectually, but still there. Yeah. The cause of craving is feeling. Remember that? Because there is pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, this in the dependent origination or causality, this gives rise to craving. One way to get beyond craving, temporarily anyway, is to go beyond, feeling. Yeah. But you have to come back to it again. All sentient beings have feeling as a natural consequence of being alive. But when you understand feeling, you don't allow it to go into craving. Pleasant feeling can arise, and pleasant feeling. But I know feeling is impermanent. Yeah? If I crave it, if I try to hold on to it and try to seek it, disappointment. When it's there, okay, fine. When it's gone, fine. Of course, I want it to come back again, but fine. So anyway, now we have the two main objects, 5 groups of grasping and the 6 senses. I mean, in keep it really short, even the 6 senses are included in 5 groups of grasping because the 6 senses are in the body, right? Yeah. But for those, those who find it useful, they can observe this ignorance and craving with regard to the 6 senses too. Sometimes it's easier where it comes to the 5 groups of grasping, and maybe we're still kind of trying to grasp what is Sanya again, what's Vijnana again. The mental processes are a little bit more subtle than, of course, the senses. They can be quite coarse. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and even thinking can be quite coarse. But it comes down to Sanya and Sankhara, then That's part of thinking process too, or the mental sense, but a bit more subtle. So the fourth stage of the arising of I-making is self-views now. Once there's identification, once you've identified with, say, you've identified with the body, for example, then start to build views around it. I'm the body. Is this body going to be eternal? Is this body going to be not eternal? Yeah. How is this body going to survive? And what, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on like that, see? So we build views around it, and this is like the most refined or developed form of self, if you like. It's like we have these self-views, and sometimes they're so all-encompassing, we don't even recognize that we're holding on to this defensive position around myself. Just practically speaking, for example, somebody says, they threaten your sense of self, and you come up with your view of yourself. No, it's not me. It's anatta, right? You're that way. No, I'm not. That's just an underlying disposition. So as far as views go, there's two kinds of views. The self-view is a basic one. The view that there is a permanent abiding self, and there is views about that self. See? And it's pretty obvious that the views about the self are dependent upon the view there is a self. They have views about, right? But people, sometimes they're so defended with their views, so caught up with their views, they never even use, if you ask them, you have this view about yourself, well, what's that self you have views about? Huh? Just practically speaking, if you say, somebody says to you, they say, I'm hopeless, I'm no good. Say, well, what's, I am no good. What's that I that you're talking about? Yeah. If that I, you look at it more carefully, you say, well, I did get good marks in school, but I failed my French. So I'm no good at French, but I can actually do arithmetic. But somehow that view of being no good or being unsuccessful is dominating, you see. But they never question the self behind it all. So the views, it might be helpful just to try to reflect upon the views you have about yourself. Do you view yourself as, after the death of the body, you're just going to finished? Going to be annihilated, food for the worms? Huh? Or do you have some kind of, at least hope, that you'll go on to a higher plane of existence, a heaven realm or something? Or all this meditation got to have a payoff somewhere. I'm not just going to be intelligent worm food. Maybe you might have this lurking self-view there in the background, and it'll kind of block your attempt to try and investigate what that self is that you have a view about, if you aren't careful about it. So anyway, the Buddha also recognizes, apparently there were so many views around at the Buddha's time, and he had to deal with these and different views about the self. But the Buddha had a little bit of a difficulty because of his enlightenment experience, he had a very different view of the self. Or you can say, actually, this is where the pun comes in, because the word view in Pali, and also English too, I think, view has two things, right? It means just as you're seeing, you have a view there. I can see those trees over there. But you also have a view of yourself. You have a belief system about yourself. I'm the person who can see trees, and I can see those manuka trees, tea trees, right? Here, manuka in New Zealand. Okay, I can see tea trees, So I must be very intelligent. That's my view, you see. Just because I can see trees, you see. But there were so many views around that the Buddha had to deal with, but he recognized it does have an effect on people. For example, there were some teachers around who had the view that it doesn't matter what you do, it has no effect. There's no cause and effect process involved. You can work, do all kinds of good karma, all the best. It has no effect at all. The whole universe is made of just causelessness. So nobody then would get motivated to practice, would they? So the Buddha really was critical of that kind of view. So he recognized the value of right view then. Made it part of the Eightfold Path, right view, the first factor. And one of the primary factor of right view is that there is results of good and bad action. Very, very fundamental. If you don't believe that, then you're wasting your time with anything. We can actually probably see it just practically in our worldly life. If somebody works hard, is diligent at their job, they might get a promotion. No guarantee, but you do get some payoff, right? If you're energetic and you do good things and you're kind and But if sometime you can work very hard and everything and nothing happens. You don't get any payoff. Nobody praises you. You don't get a raise. You think, oh, the universe is causeless. You come to that kind of conclusion without really realizing the deeper laws of the universe, you see. So the Buddha realized, part of his insight was too, that there is the results of action. And that there is, another important one was that there are people who are practicing rightly. There are people who can do the skillful actions, follow spiritual practice and get enlightened, if you like. Because some people nowadays, it's become part of some kind of Theravada tradition that we're in the Dharma ending age, you see. So now it's 2,500 years since the Buddha. No more arahants, folks. Yep. Tough luck. You missed out. Just do good actions. You might get good karma and get reborn in the time of the next Buddha. But that's not right view. It's not right view. Whether you become an arahant or not this lifetime or this era, this isn't really important. But skillful actions give skillful results. But we can't say when. It could be immediately, it could be later in this life, it could be in some future existence, the Buddha said. But we have to have the faith first, the belief, the view that good, skillful actions will give skillful results. Otherwise, this undermines. It's like having it's like saying, being sick and saying, I can never get well. Well, modern science now has found out that your attitude has very strong effects upon your physical being. If you think negative thoughts, you think you're going to be sick forever, well, very likely you will be. Psychosomatic symptoms, you see. But at least if you think positive thoughts, at least you think positive thoughts, there is a possibility, no guarantee. There might be a really deep-rooted physical cause, but you have the possibility to overcome it, to go beyond it. Because your mind isn't also polluted with wrong view or negative thinking, see? So at least it's better to think that all your efforts are going to have some positive result. At least you think that way. Then you begin to see it maybe. Even though, we have some maybe unskillful habits, but you work at them energetically, persistently. As Ajahn Chah once said, you worry about becoming, enlightened or whatever. He said, well, if you live a whole lifetime with some degree of diligence, and patience, perseverance, working at the Dhamma practice, you should be enlightened. It's just just a simple cause and effect result. But if you just keep worrying about it, you probably cause yourself more hindrances than benefit. So anyway, I covered the 4 stages now. Underlying dispositions, the beginning of I am, the conceit I am, Identification, that's a very significant one because that's where most of our Dhamma practice happens, towards ignorance, working with ignorance, against ignorance, hopefully, and craving. Then there's views, self-views. As long as we have recognize the value of right view, right view, then we're hopefully we'll be able to see through the other views about the self. There's kind of, you can say, general ones about yourself, whether you will get reborn in a heaven realm or some other, excuse me, and there's relative ones too. My practice is not going nowhere. I can't succeed. I'm, hopeless at this, whatever. But there is positive results from skillful actions. So we keep up with that, and you can just see transformation eventually. Can't say when though. Yeah. So I finished the part 2 now of the beginning, the how I-making is created. So next time we start on the cessation of I-making. That's what we all came here for, right? Cessation of I-making? Or is it just you want to keep your eye going? Huh? So next session begins the part 3 of the cessation of I-making, which is where the real practice begins, if you say. First of all, we have to know part of ignorance. I think part of ignorance there's 2 parts of ignorance, I would say. One is just not knowing, like blindness, not knowing you're even ignorant. The other one is partial knowing or distorted knowing. You know some things and you think you know more than you do, But when we begin to recognize, okay, I-making is like this, there's ignorance, there's craving, we get the groundwork prepared. It's like we looked at the map already, which direction to travel in now, where we have to put our efforts, rather than just beating around through the bush bashing through the bush. We know where the path is now, so hopefully it'll speed our way on the journey. So all the best for your practice in the future.